And we're back. Continue what we talked about last time. This is Downbelow RPG Developer Discussion. My name is Steve.
And I'm Ian.
And we are going to talk about the fine line between when to invoke the system and when not to invoke the system.
Specifically, when does player effort and knowledge make that distinction?
Okay, so obviously players and characters are separate. Nobody's going to argue this, even in some of the after the end RPGs that have come out. That really cool concept. They basically say assign based on real life qualities what your stats are. Here are some guidelines. So of course I'm going to assign myself an 18 charisma because obviously everyone swoons for me. No, they'll actually use descriptors for it, and then you have literally what you have on you. The world is ending. Go. Aside from things like that, there's really no direct player-character correlation. In some places, such as the realm of the physical interaction, games have codified this for a long time. There's really no game out there where Thor the Mountain, the player Thor the Mountain, will, by his ability to deadlift 700 kilograms, prove that his fairy princess Tinkerbell could conceivably lift the door that way. Everyone understands that's not how it works. So there's already a divide there because quite frequently we will ask players, you can't just say your character makes a rousing speech, you gotta give a rousing speech, and that's wrong.
Does that flout the same assumption that says that your character can lift the door when you can't, or vice versa? Well, here's where it gets sticky, because at the same time as the player character and the player are clearly separate beings, they are also inseparable. Although you can have a player play a different character, you can't have a character without a player playing them.
Right. So we're going to break this down into a couple of categories to help define a line. And I'm going to use our system as an example for this. You should be able to extrapolate these principles to other games, but we're going to approach it from the when to spend a success versus when not to spend a success.
And the line that we're going to help you define is a movable line that you will set when you are the GM, because the assigning of the borderline for when you do and do not use the system is one of the jobs of the GM, and some people would say the most important job of the GM.
So basically, we could break it down into three categories of things that are important, and that is that is player skill, character qualification, and time. There's a fourth phantom category, and the phantom category is one that's going to help you decide where to set the bar, because the phantom category is group engagement.
And there are some other qualifications that we'll get into after we've defined those terms.
Right. So let's talk about the first one, and that is that's character qualification. Character qualification is really simple. In our system, that is saying, hi, your character is qualified to solve this puzzle, crack this riddle, talk to these person. They have the appropriate skills and or traits that they could spend to get a result off of this person.
And this is where we get to a category of, there are some things that clearly require you to spend successes. If you don't have any clues that can set up this puzzle for you, then you can't just conjure them without spending successes. You need to say, okay, I'm going to use my computer trait to get those pieces of information off of this computer system, or negotiation to get it out of a person, etc.
In the case of a riddle, for instance, this is a case where spending successes is practically vital. You could simply say, my character has the trait Master of Riddles. I will spend a success using that trait, and we are done with this. Give us the answer. Let's go. This is a perfectly valid use of the system. You have drained a trait, possibly more traits if it is something that is difficult enough to require multiple clues or have multiple riddles, and perfectly adequate use of the system. Let's move on to the second one. The second thing that helps you define the line is player skill. Player skill, again, this one predominantly comes into play in, let's be honest, in the puzzle and mystery side of things. Player skill in rhetoric, oratory, and convincing of things should require some sort of in-game cost to give you the clues you'll need to tailor your speaking skill to the characters to which you are talking.
But here, as with the riddles, we come into a murkier zone. So let's say that you have a riddle that you think the players will need all 5 of the clues you've set up, but after players obtain 2 clues, one of the players says, "I've got it," and explains everything, and they're right.
This actually leads us seamlessly to the next aspect, which is time/resources. So here's the thing. You are, as the GM, perfectly within your rights to bypass a lot of stuff. However, a famous grandfather of the game once said, there can be no meaningful campaign without accurate timekeeping and records keeping. This remains true. The thing is, when you're relying on the system to provide successes, in a dice-based game such as Dungeons & Dragons or most other classic traditional role-playing games, you have a relatively fine description of how long any given action can take. So if your players are relying purely on mechanical character skill and dice rolling, you know how long they're spending. But there's not always a one-to-one correlation between real-world time and in-game time. Sometimes it's closer to one-to-one, sure. Other times there's this massive dilation. One great example being combat, which dilates on the era of 1 second in 1 minute in real time could only be a second or less in game time, because you get into several second combat rounds. So you could be playing all night and have 5 minutes pass in game time, and that's fine. That's satisfying. But there's time dilation. There's another time dilation, which is where game time passes much faster. How can you tell for sure? In the case of the skill check in many systems, that'll give you a set time. In the case of your players figuring it out, that's great. They've figured it out, and they've spent any successes they need to gather clues, and you can deplete the time resource for how long it took to figure out.
So we're going to cut off our explanation there and actually bring up a part 2 of player skill as it relates to this borderline next time.
Yep.
And talk about the decision that the GM makes. Thanks for sticking with us, and we hope that you'll like, subscribe, comment, and fall between the cracks with us again.